Imagine a man so tall, so strong, and so feared by his captors that they kept him apart from the other slaves, not to punish him, but to use him. They say he fathered over 200 children, perhaps even 300. His name was Pata Seca. Was he a real man, or just a legend born in the darkest corners of Brazilian slavery? Today, we will explore the haunting tale of Pata Seca, the breeder slave of 19th century Brazil, and uncover the truth hidden behind the myth. To understand Pata Seca's story, we must first step into Brazil during the 1800s, a nation whose wealth was built on the suffering of millions. Brazil was the last country in the Western world to abolish slavery, in 1888, with the signing of the Lei Áurea, or Golden Law. By that time, over 4 million Africans had been forcibly brought to Brazil, more than any other country in the Americas. Slavery in Brazil was deeply entrenched in its plantation economy. Coffee, sugarcane, and cotton were the lifeblood of the nation's exports. Plantations were massive, stretching for miles, and required endless labor. African slaves were the backbone of this system. Life for a slave in Brazil was brutal. They worked from sunrise to sunset under the blazing tropical sun, often barefoot, carrying heavy loads or cutting cane with sharp machetes. Beatings were common, and medical care was rare. And there was another, even darker practice, one rarely discussed in official histories: slave breeding. In this system, enslaved men and women were forced to reproduce, not for love, but for the profit of their masters. Children born into slavery were considered property from the moment they took their first breath, ready to be sold or put to work. While this practice is well documented in the United States, in Brazil it was less formalized but still present. Some plantation owners would identify men with exceptional physical traits, height, strength, endurance, and force them to father as many children as possible. These men were kept healthy, well-fed, and paired with multiple women over the years. It was here, in this dark reality, that the legend of Pata Seca would take root. The man we call Pata Seca was said to have been born Roque José Florêncio around 1828, somewhere in Angola, Africa. His exact birthplace and early childhood remain a mystery, as no official records have survived. Like millions of others, he was captured or sold into the transatlantic slave trade and shipped to Brazil as a young boy. His nickname, Pata Seca, translates to dry foot in Portuguese. Some say it referred to the shape of his feet. Others believe it symbolized his unusual stride or the way he walked without making much noise. What we do know, or at least what legend tells us, is that Pata Seca grew into an extraordinary figure. Standing at an astonishing 2.18 meters, over 7 feet tall, he towered over everyone around him. His broad shoulders, muscular frame, and physical endurance caught the attention of his masters. For a slave owner in 19th century Brazil, such a man was more than just a worker. He was an investment. And in Pata Seca's case, the investment was not in his labor on the fields, but in his ability to produce children. His master allegedly removed him from regular plantation work and placed him in a special position. Pata Seca's role was to father as many children as possible, spreading his physical traits to the next generation of slaves. Over the years, this would become the defining aspect of his life, and the reason his story would echo through the centuries. For most slaves, life on a Brazilian plantation meant endless hard labor. But for Pata Seca, it was different, though not less cruel. His master saw in him an opportunity to improve the stock of enslaved workers. According to local accounts, Pata Seca was kept in special living quarters, away from the exhausting work of the fields. His diet was richer, ensuring his health and strength. He was given new clothes more often than most slaves, and some say he was even taught basic reading and writing, not for his own benefit, but to make him more valuable. Women from the plantation, and sometimes from neighboring estates, were brought to him. These encounters were not relationships in the romantic sense. They were acts of control and exploitation. The women had no say in the matter. For the slave owner, it was simple economics: A strong father and a healthy mother could produce a child who would grow into a productive worker. Over time, Pataseka's reputation grew. The number of children attributed to him climbed steadily. It was said that he could father a dozen or more in a single year. If the legend is true, his offspring may have numbered over 200 by the time slavery was abolished. For Pataseka himself, the emotional toll is harder to imagine. Many of these children would have been sold away, never to be seen again. The system did not allow for family bonds. It reduced people to numbers and profits. The most famous and most debated part of Pataseka's story is the claim that he fathered more than 200 children. Local oral traditions tell of 249 documented children, though no official birth records have been found. Others say the number could be as high as 300. Many residents of Santa Eudóxia, a rural district in the municipality of São Carlos, still claim to be descendants of Pataseka. In fact, some believe that as much as 30% of the local population can trace their roots back to him. Stories about his height, strength, and breeding role have been passed down through generations. To some, Pataseka became a symbol of endurance and survival, proof that even in the face of dehumanization, life could persist. To others, he is a tragic reminder of how far human cruelty can go when people are treated as property. The legend grew after his death, with each retelling adding new details. Some say he had a gentle personality despite his size. Others claim he was feared even by other slaves, who saw him as too closely associated with the masters. Whatever the truth, the image of the towering man who fathered hundreds remains burned into local memory. In 1888, Brazil finally abolished slavery. For the first time in his life, Pataseka was legally free. According to the legend, his former master granted him a small plot of land as a form of reward for his years of service. Here, Pataseka built a modest home and tried to create a different life for himself. He married a woman named Palmyra, and together they had 9 children, this time as a real family, not as part of a breeding arrangement. Those who claim to remember him in his later years describe a man who was still physically imposing, even in old age. He worked his land, cared for his family, and occasionally met people who introduced themselves as his children from his years as a slave. The story takes an almost mythical turn, with the claim that Pataseka lived to be 130 years old. He supposedly died in 1958 from tetanus after stepping on a rusty nail. While this age is highly questionable and likely exaggerated, it adds to the aura of the legend. Today, there is even a statue of Pataseka in Santa Eudóxia, honoring him as both a historical figure and a piece of local folklore. For some, it is a tribute to survival. For others, it is a reminder of an uncomfortable past. While the story of Pataseka has been told and retold for decades, historians struggle to separate fact from fiction. The first challenge is the lack of records. Brazil's slavery archives are incomplete, especially for rural regions like Santa Eudóxia in the 1800s. Birth records for slaves were often not kept, and when they were, they listed only the first name, sometimes without a date. The claim that he fathered over 200 children is based almost entirely on oral history, the stories passed down through families who believe they are his descendants. While oral tradition is important for preserving culture, it can also mix truth with embellishment over generations. The reported height of 2.18 meters also raises questions. While possible, such extreme height would have been very rare and likely caused by a medical condition like gigantism. If true, this would have made Pataseka even more of an object of curiosity for his owners. But there are no photographs or reliable descriptions from his lifetime to confirm it. And then there is the most unbelievable claim of all, that he lived to 130 years old. Human lifespans of that length are virtually unheard of, and would make him one of the oldest people in recorded history. Most historians agree that this detail is almost certainly exaggerated, possibly a symbolic way to describe his long life in the community's memory. In the end, Pataseka exists in a gray space, part man, part myth. The lack of documents leaves room for doubt, but the persistence of his story means that for the people of Santa Eudóxia, his legacy is real, whether or not the numbers are. Even if we set aside the specific details of Pataseka's life, his story shines a light on one of the most disturbing aspects of slavery: the use of human beings as breeding stock. In the transatlantic slave trade, people were not only bought and sold, they were bred. Children were seen as future profit. A healthy child could be raised into a worker or sold for cash. This turned reproduction into an economic tool for slave owners. For the enslaved, this was a deep violation. Women were denied the right to choose their partners. Men were stripped of the ability to form families in any real sense. Parents watched their children taken away. Over generations, this destroyed family structures and left lasting scars on entire communities. In Brazil, where slavery lasted longer than in almost any other country, these practices contributed to a complex legacy. Many Brazilians today can trace their ancestry to enslaved Africans, but the family histories are often fragmented or lost entirely. Pataseka's legend forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths. Whether he fathered 50 children or 300, his life reminds us that slavery was not only about forced labor, it was also about control over the most intimate parts of a person's life: their body, their relationships, their ability to decide their own future. So, who was Pataseka? Was he the towering giant who fathered hundreds? A man whose genes shaped a community? Or was he a story, part truth, part exaggeration, told to keep alive the memory of a time when human dignity was stripped away? Perhaps we will never know the full truth, but what we do know is that his story, real or mythical, carries a lesson. It forces us to look at the human cost of slavery, not just in numbers and dates, but in personal stories that touch on survival, exploitation, and the strength of memory. If you've watched this far, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the story of Pataseka is real, or is it a local legend that grew over time? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this story worth telling, please subscribe and share it. And remember, history is not just about kings and battles. It's also about the lives of those who had no power, but whose stories still shape us today.